iBuyer Mastermind. I have an amazing guest for us today, somebody who knows 1,000 times more than I do in this entire iBuyer field, in this investing field. The guy who is basically writing the book for me, and I'm just trying to be a little bit more like Gary, both with his chiseled, tanned body. I was really emphatic on that, wasn't I, Gary?
It's pretty awesome.
But really, you're a guy that I am so thankful to have in my life as a friend, somebody I look up to. You're leading a lot of things that I'm just trying to follow along with. And we need to understand who you are first, how you got to be the owner of RealEstateInvestor.com and what that looks like. So can you walk us through a little bit of your history to help people understand that just my words aren't empty promises?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. It's awesome, Eric. Love what you do, and I love our fellowship together. We were in the mastermind down in Tulum. It was incredibly fun. But yeah, a little history on me. My name's Gary Boomershine. I'm in the San Francisco, California Bay Area market. I actually, the funny thing about, you were talking about tan and dropping weight. I'm 51, so I turned 51, and when I hit 50, my wife called it my midlife crisis, and I decided to get a personal trainer and drop about 40 pounds, and she's like, hey, it's a midlife crisis, but hey, keep it up. So I found that getting a coach, having a coach in your life in any of the disciplines we want to improve has been a life changer, and I've got 4 of them. Two CEO coaches, a personal trainer, so I encourage everybody to do that as a best practice. I grew up in a real estate family. We had a really well-known, reputable brand in the San Francisco Bay Area starting in the 1970s. And all of us kids, I'm the youngest of 4, we were all licensed agents. So 2 weeks after turning 18 in 1987, I was a licensed agent. I paid for college by door knocking, cold calling, mostly door knocking. That was a lot of it, and holding open houses. And I held my license for 18 years. And it was in 2004 that I actually went full-time real estate investing. So 16 years as of now. And I had an attorney because in the early days of 2004, I was very focused on buying foreclosures, pre-foreclosures, before anybody even knew what a short sale was. I was like the only game in town. I was doing it on the luxury home market. And our family real estate attorney said, hey, Gary, I would suggest that you get rid of your license just because you're in California. And so I got rid of my license. But I've been doing real estate.
And I'll pause there quickly. We're running into, because this group is all realtors, and we're running into some problems of what we can do because we have to follow the real estate laws and rules, and it's complicated.
Yeah. I will tell you, from my perspective, as an investor, in retrospect, I would have kept my license. In retrospect, I think that the disclosures are important, and I think the ability of offering your snap offer, the multiple offer strategy, is absolutely brilliant. It is the iBuyer coup de grace to be playing in this current market, and I wish I had mine because I work with the realtor team, but I take marketing fees, and it would be just easier if I had my own brokerage. And I would imagine going into this new awesome market that we're about to be part of, I may find myself getting a license again, to be honest with you. So let's see. I also have a unique background, and I won't go into the kind of the why, but I got a computer engineering degree. I had a mentor way back in the day, and it was the thing to do from a mentor was like do something on the computer side. So I've got a computer engineering degree, mostly on the software side and databases. And I went down the technology path, the Silicon Valley route. I was hired right out of college at the largest management consulting firm, Accenture. And I was there for 5.5 years. And then I did 4 enterprise software companies and moved from consulting into sales. So my background was selling $1 million to $10 million software, complex software that you have to learn how to sell, that you can only explain it because you can't see it. And what I found is it's very similar to what we do in the real estate business of building relationships and building trust and offering solutions to problems. And I'm probably more, everybody thinks of me as the marketing guy. I'm probably more uniquely qualified on selling. I love selling, and marketing is nothing but a means to get you in front of the right people at the right time. And so in 2004, when my wife and I decided full-time real estate, and it was a lot because at the time, Erik, we had two small kids. I had a 3-month-old daughter in 2004, 3 months old, and a 4-year-old. And I was never home. I was traveling. I was in the office buildings like 80, 90 hours a week.
Mhm.
I think in 2003, I booked 180,000 miles on United, not overall, but just United Airlines. And so
That's doubly painful, not only traveling that much, but flying United.
there was no life. I was a complete workaholic. I went into real estate to actually get a life. I'd come home and the dogs would bark at me. They didn't even recognize me. And so we said, you know what? This is no life. I did a company that was Fortune magazine, front cover. One day I was worth $7.5 million on paper from an IPO, being employee number 12, to 6 months later. It was right after 9/11, and 6 months later, it imploded, and IBM ended up ultimately buying them. But I found out that I had a $1.7 million tax bill. And my wife and I are like, you know what? Let's get out of this nonsense and let's get back to what we know, brick and mortar. And so 2004, I went off on my own. Now, I took my technology background and sales and real estate and came up with a little mousetrap. Because what I said is, if I can just get in front of the right sellers at the right time, and I can do my job. And so I hired a group of people overseas that came from my previous background, and they built a little algorithm, computer algorithm on direct mail of how to pull a magical foreclosure and bankruptcy list, algorithmically score it, and then drop a multi-step series of direct mail. And then if the properties were vacant, it would automatically skip trace those for phone numbers, and then we track them down, and that's how I bought all my properties. And so what happened in 2005, I built a business around it. And people came to me all over the country, and I was presenting just like you do. You get invited to speak at different conferences. In fact, I was in front of 1,000 people, and Donald Trump was the speaker right before me. And I got to debut our software marketing product, and that was in 2006. So quite a long time ago, but we've done over 50 million pieces of direct mail. The company is called RealEstateInvestor.com. We've got about 1,200 clients. About 40% are agents. So that's probably, especially, and you were part of this whole movement for us, because we were very focused on investors, which is competing with realtors. And we had some very top performing real estate teams that basically said, that brought us to rate the real estate and TV experts in New York. And what they said is that you're our little secret weapon, because, and so now we have agent teams that are realizing the iBuyer play is huge, and they're coming to us as that competitive advantage or differentiator to compete with the Zillows and the Open Doors of the world. And I love it right now, because a lot of that iBuyer platform is totally stalled up in this COVID market, right? There was $3 trillion, and a lot of that is just push button, no longer competition for us for a period of time. And I think the agents that are jumping on this bandwagon, following guys like you on how to do this, where you can offer multiple solutions to a seller, are going to kill it and do really, really well.
Gary, let me ask this, because prior to the last couple of years, your main focus had been investors and wholesalers, right?
Yes.
Most of us as realtors think that we have it figured out, but there's a lot of lessons that we could and should learn from investors and wholesalers. What are some tips and tricks you can give our group here? I want to learn more about direct mail. I want to learn about some financing options, but I want to first ask, what do you know? What do your clients know that we don't, that we probably should?
Yeah, it's it's the little gem. It's the intersection of an investor and an agent. Typically, investors can offer things. You know, over the 16 years, I would say, we have learned how to be able to offer things that real estate agents cannot. So I can go meet with the seller and say, gosh, Mr. Seller, I can do things by direct. I don't need a real estate license because I'm a principal buying the property, right? I'm actually on the purchase agreement, not trying to list it. And I could just write you a check. And I can do things like, you know, you can leave as much of the stuff in the house. We don't have to have open houses, and you don't have to do any fix up of the property, right? So typically an investor will just come in at a lower price as a net and be able to say, hey, I can offer you this amount of money, and let me show you what you might be able to net possibly with an agent after paying the commission and all the holding costs and all the closing costs. I can just write you a check and still use the title company, but cut all that middle stuff and the fluff out. That's been our typical position. Now, we can do even better things than that. We can actually buy creatively. So, or I can actually, all contracts, because of the international law around contracting, all contracts are assignable by law unless it's written into the contract that you cannot assign it.
So pause there, because that is a really big takeaway. And we're teaching this group about wholesaling as another option where they're not having to be the ones to buy it. You're telling me that any contract is assignable unless it has specificity in there that says that it's not.
That is correct. Now, the departments of real estate hate this because they've had their own little private little club and their private little marketing engine called the MLS. And they've been able to, you know, have their boilerplate contracts, right, for the most part. And that's been their model. And so the Department of Real Estate, it does not like this, but it's an international private contracting law that a contract, I have an interest in personal property. So a contract, right, I don't have an interest in the house, but I have an interest in personal property, which is a signed contract between me or my company and the seller. And I can assign that contract to somebody else. And I can take a fee, an assignment fee. And title companies all over the country do this. There are some states that are trying to like Ohio has been trying to push the envelope where you have to have an agent license. It'll be very interesting to see what happens over the long haul, because I don't think that actually is legal. And the reason is that international law, including countries, do this all the time. They're always assigning contracts and paperwork. And even companies, think of like General Electric, you know, they'll sign contracts and then assign those contracts to other divisions. And there's all kinds of purchasing contracts, et cetera. So I can go in, sign a contract, and then I can go in and assign the contract between me, assigning this contract over to this cash buyer over here. And I can take a fee for that. It can be even better. One of the things I do is, let's say, now, let me just back up. There's one negative about that, because when I assign a contract, that obviously goes to the bank, whoever's funding that transaction for the new buyer. And if it's an FHA buyer who's using a Federal Reserve FDIC-based bank, they do not like that. So typically, if you're assigning a contract, the bank will see it and they don't like the fact that there's an assignment from party A to party B. And so sometimes you have to do a double closing. So we may actually close and do transactional financing for a day and then assign it. And some banks will have seasoning requirements. And then there's another thing that investors might do. And I don't know many people. I think I may have been the creator of this little technique. It's worked. I've done, I don't know, 50 deals like this. But I'll sign a contract with the seller. I'll have a great relationship. This is all fully disclosed. I'm very transparent with the seller. And the seller will be happy and they'll say, yes, if I can get $150,000 in cash net, and that's what I get. Exclusive, you know, I'm not worried about the costs. The buyer will pay all the costs and closing costs, however we negotiate it. I can go and sign that contract. And let's say, and in that contract, I'll put the ability of putting it on the MLS. So we can actually even market and remarket that property because we have an interest in that contract. It's in the legal document. I may be able to put it on the MLS. And let's say, and I did this in Fort Collins, I would have made like $15,000. Instead, I made $165,000 on one deal, doing almost no work. I find a standard FHA buyer and using a realtor. A realtor comes in and they're representing it. And so what I will do is I'll just go ahead and cancel that original contract in exchange for demand at escrow. So what happens is, let's say I'm in contract for 150 and somebody comes in and they want to buy the property for 200, right, with a bank. I can't normally do that with an assignment. So what I'll do is I'll cancel that $150,000 contract in exchange for a $50,000 demand at closing. Okay, and that shows up on the seller side of the HUD as if it were a lien, a judgment, a realtor fee, whatever it might be. So it's not on the buyer side of the HUD, it's on the seller side as a demand. And I've done that over and over again. The banks don't have a problem. And as long as I have a great relationship with the seller and fully disclosed, we're good to go. So, and there's 100 ways that I can skin that cat. I can get owner financing that most realtors haven't a clue. I can pay a higher purchase price. So let's say you come in, Eric, or one of us as an agent and say, hey, we can list your property or I can buy it with cash. And let's say it's 150,000. Okay, or maybe list the property and they do some fix-ups and they may get 180,000 net. I might come in and say, hey, Mr. Seller, what if I buy the property for 200, higher than retail? And if you'd be flexible on how I pay you. And how about, you could be the bank. Instead of me going and getting Wells Fargo or Bank of America or private money, what if I were able to have you carry and basically be the bank? And so they'll actually be the lender for a piece of it. So I might buy a $200,000 property, and in many cases, I've come in with nothing, zero down. Usually I'm coming in with about 10%. But I'll come in and then I'll structure a long-term note and negotiate those terms. So, and why would a seller do that? A lot of these landlords, they're looking for the higher price, but because they want to get out of being a landlord, but they want the cash flow and they just don't want to deal with the tenants. And so they like the income stream and the long-term income stream, but they really don't want to pay the capital gains. So the IRS has what's called an incomplete sale. And so if I buy it with owner financing, that seller only has to declare the income or the appreciation on what they receive on a yearly basis. And it's just awesome. So I'm able to do a lot of those deals. I think it's going to become even more prevalent as we go into this new market. So I can offer all cash. I can offer some cash and, you know, pay a little now and pay a little later, and all kinds of terms. I have one of our guys, you know him, Steve Carlson.
Yeah.
Steve structured a deal in San Antonio where the seller actually deferred the entire payment for 9 years. So he took $90,000, the seller, carried it back with a due clause, a balloon payment that's not due until 9 years. So Steve was able to have an additional $900 a month in income for 9 years. That the property had massive appreciation, and then he just refied out the guy. Now, what I would have done is I would have come in at year 5 or 6, and I would have said, hey, I've got a $90,000 loan, but if you want to take a small haircut, I can pay you now. And then I might discount that 90,000 down to say 60. I've done a lot of that. So I know, that's why I said there's 100 different tools that us investors can do that I think that if agents learn some of it, it's like building a house. If you're a general contractor, would you really just come in with a hammer and that's all you're using? Or would you want to have power saws and tools and a whole army of people to do the work for you? And I think that's the that's the business. We can wholesale, we can do listings, we can buy it with cash, we can buy it with owner financing. It's just the paperwork. It's just how we structure the papers.
And so are you working in cahoots with a really great real estate lawyer that's helping you see all these angles and find these opportunities? Because I'm hearing you talk right now, Gary, and like we've chatted about this before. And every time you talk, I'm like, I have so much to learn. Oh, there's so many opportunities that I'm just saying no to because I only have 2 or 3 options. And you're telling me there's hundreds of options. Like, how do I do what you do?
Yeah. A lot of people have been asking for us to build like a program around this. And I haven't done it yet. You might actually find that we offer something here for people. There's different courses and different coaching that I've had over the years, real estate investor courses. I haven't seen a lot of it lately, but Jack Miller he's now passed away, but he was teaching this. Peter Fortunato is another guy. He's out of Florida. He's bought over 3,000 houses, and I think he's only sold 6 ever. And he's never used any money out of his own pocket, not a single one. He's bought all the properties. In fact, he showed us a couple months ago that his 103-year-old grandmother just closed on 3 houses. Of course, he did all the work, but there's also investing with our qualified retirement plan. And some people use IRAs. I actually use a 401k that I control. I don't have to have any third party, and I will buy those. And there's also lending, a lot of pieces around lending. So yeah, where do you go to learn it? I really need to build some sort of program. Maybe you can help me with that, Erik, and bring in a small group of people and kind of a train the trainer model.
If honestly, what you have is what I want, you know what I mean? And if I can help to launch that, I think that we're going to have eyeballs all around for people to figure out how to get creative. I'd also love, and if you can email me when we're done here, Gary, maybe I'll share with the group. If you have a great real estate lawyer or source or some things that I should be pointing to, it's obviously going to cost us to figure it out, and it's going to make us a whole lot of wealth on the back end of that.
Yeah.
Gary, you've also spoken to me about how you have structured deals where you've purchased the property, but you've essentially done some rent backs, or you've allowed them to stay in. And I've heard you just talk of these stories of the money that you've made because you've provided solutions for people that were creative. Keep going. Give us a couple more examples, because I want this group to really have their wheels spinning. I'm imagining there's going to be some follow-up questions that I'll bring to you. But like, what else? What else are you doing to be creative with this? Because we have marketing machines here, Gary. These realtors are better at identifying properties and servicing people than anyone. We just don't know what our options are. What are our options?
Yeah. I really need to get with you and Jeff out of Omaha and a handful of other people. If I could assemble a small group, it would probably be like a 3-day. We could even do it virtual, where I'd teach, and then we really, part of it.
Can we please go to your place in Hawaii instead? I
know, that would be fun. I'm just waiting for as soon as the lockdown is over in Hawaii, we're jumping on a plane. Yeah. We're currently booked. It's a VRBO Airbnb. That whole market, by the way, that's another little hidden gem. People who have bought properties as rental properties are getting crushed right now. And I think that's a great buying opportunity, just as a little note for finding good properties that are, let's see. Let me walk through a couple of really interesting scenarios. Okay. There's really a couple of parts. There's talking to the seller of how to structure these types of deals, the conversations that we have with the seller. I think the agents are probably the most well-trained for even having this dialogue. Most investors they don't understand the relationship component that I think every agent understands, because that's your business, right?
Yeah, I was on your webinar and podcast here recently. We talked specifically about that, of how most investors are talking numbers and they're not talking and transactions. They're not talking relationships.
Right.
And
Relate.
that's where I think we can do exceedingly well.
Absolutely. Relationship, building trust, and then the third is coming up with a solution to their problem. And I always put it into two offers. Like I can give offer one or offer two. It's usually it's usually my price, your terms, Mr. Seller. My price, the price that I'm comfortable. That's usually all cash, and they want the cash right now. Or my other option is your price, my terms. And that's usually, I'm going to give them a much higher price, but it's going to be more around owner financing, very little amount down. And then usually we end up somewhere in the middle. And it allows me to compete in ways that none of my competition can compete. So other investors will come out and offer a really crappy lowball cash offer. And a realtor will come in and talk about all the work they have to do and clean up and people going through their closets and garbage cans in open houses.
Yeah.
And I can come in and say, Mr. Seller, tell me what you want. What is ideal? And I'll structure two offers and we'll usually come up with a third right in the middle. And I lock those down. Okay. So it's how to talk to a seller. And what I have found in the creative side is, and this is where I train my sales acquisition guys that are actually doing the initial appointments for me. And all I do is I have them say, gosh, Mr. Seller, I know I can offer you all cash of $150. But if you'd be a little flexible on how we pay you, I might be able to get you as close to, maybe 180, 100. Sometimes it can be anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20% above the offer price.
And you're valuing this property, this mythical $150,000 property, probably as a retail of 200, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
The model for investors is typically we're taking the after repaired value, conservative after repaired value, fixed up, and then we're typically taking, depending upon where the market is and what area, we're taking anywhere from about 60% to as high as 80% of that after repaired value, and then we're subtracting off our repair cost. Yeah. And that's usually, plus if we're a wholesaler, we're taking an additional wholesale fee, and that's kind of what we call our maximum allowable offer, our MAO, M-O-A, maximum, M-A-O, maximum allowable offer. And that's how most investors do it. Now, in this new market, we're starting to see that number start to go down, that percentage. Yeah. Yeah. California, it was as high as like 85%. And now it's probably closer to maybe 80% right now in this COVID stuff.
And the reason why, my average sales price in Fargo is $235,000. Your average sales price in the Bay Area is probably $850,000, right? And right. So your margin of that 20% versus my margin of 20%, your margin is $170,000. Right. My margin is, $45,000. Yeah.
And it's such a wonderful conversation with the seller because we do everything, we actually show them. I love the net sheet of like how you show them the numbers, because a good experienced 7 to 8 figure real estate investor or business operator that's doing, 10, 50 deals, 100 deals a year or more. We're doing the same thing. We're showing them the numbers. So what I will show the seller is typically, Mr. Seller, if I put $20,000 of fix-ups into the property, I want to get my money back, and usually I want to make a dollar for dollar. So if I invest $1 in repairs, I want to get about $1 back. And in fact, Mr. Seller, if you want to do the work, then you can do that too. So if you want to come up with the 20 grand on your own, get a good contractor, you'll probably do that as well. But we're really fast, and I've got a team, and the sellers will say, I don't want that headache. Totally makes sense. Because I'll ask them, I'll just say, hey, as long as you're okay with me making a modest profit somehow, some way, I don't want to lose money, then if that works for you, then I would be a great solution. And if the seller says, hey, I love that idea, let's construct something. I beat out the realtors. They can't compete with me. The other cash offer investors can't work with me. There's no competition. And so I'm in a market like California where there's going to be 30 people lined up to meet with that seller. And I will always come in and win the deal because I can do more things, offer more solutions, and still make a really handsome profit. So a couple other things. So there's the conversation I have with the seller. not very hard to learn. There is the paperwork of how to structure it. A real estate investor friendly attorney that has some creative capability, I think would be really a good place to start. I actually use a 3-page contract. If I'm not using the California DRE, the standard papers, I have a 3-page contract that we've perfected with my attorney team that allows me to do anything I want. And then I have a special set of addendums, and that allows me to buy. And really what it is what's the purchase price? I should pull one up, or we could do another call on this for your team. I have a purchase price. And then if I'm taking over a mortgage, I can actually, a lot of people don't even know you can do this. I can take an existing mortgage subject to. So I can just take over the payments. I can buy a property. And if, let's say, I mean, this is all I did from 2004 to 2007. So hundreds of these, but I could buy a property subject to the existing debt. And I'm not assuming it. I'm not having to go to the bank. I'm just making the payments. And in fact, the house I'm living in right now, I bought it in 2010. My name's not on the mortgage. Got the most amazing loan on it. Why would I ever want to pay it off? So it doesn't show on my credit report. And all legal. I used standard California DRE. I added some notes with my attorney. And it's called subject to. Now, a lot of agents that are listening to this right now, they're going to be like, oh, there's a due on sale clause. That's what we've been trained or indoctrinated in, right, in the jargon of the real estate world. But there's actually a very interesting law from 1982 called Garn-St. Germain Act that basically said, it's a federal law, and it says that a loan can be called due if there's been a transfer of the property and there's a loan. So banks don't really call these. I've never heard of a bank actually calling the loan due on a transfer, by the way, just as a note. If the interest rates go up, they probably will possibly. But there's 13 clauses of where a bank cannot call a loan due. And one of the ones that we use is if the property were put into a trust, into our grantor's trust for the benefit of the grantor. All right. And I won't go into all the details of that, but if there's a trust on the property, like the property is held in a trust, like a family living trust, for the benefit of the grantor, the banks, it's checkmated. So you can take over a property and pay the mortgage and interact with the bank. Like I interact directly with the bank. I can call the bank. I have an authorization to release, and I can call and interact with the bank at any time I want if I have the legal paperwork and they don't call the loans due. So that's a little tool we use. And anyway, that's on the purchase agreement. And then if there's a down payment, what does that look like? How much? And then if the seller is going to carry back paper, which means they're going to be like the bank. And let's say they're going to carry back $50,000 or $100,000. I just put the terms and conditions, and then we write up we have another document that's a promissory note, just like any other promissory note. And that becomes the security. So, right, we could go on for hours and hours, but you know, the property has a deed, it's a warranty deed, and then you got the security device that's called a mortgage or deed of trust. They're separate. So the ownership is very separate from the security. So as long as you know how to structure that and you do it legally, then these are little tools that investors use all the time.
So let's talk about that why of that example. So let's say you're assuming somebody's mortgage. You're taking over the mortgage subject to, what are some of those subject tos?
Subject to the making the payments. So yeah. the loan will stay in the name of the seller. And yes, there is a downside, and that downside is if I'm not making the payments, that property could go to foreclosure. So that always comes up with the seller of like, hey, what about in this particular scenario? But I may be able to buy a foreclosure property that's in pre-foreclosure that has a lot of equity in it, and I may be able to just bring the loan current, right? Let's say they're $10,000 in default. I could just write a check directly to the bank for the 10 grand. own the property, and continue to make the payments on that property. And then there could also be a situation, so I don't have to short sell it. I don't have to do anything. I can just take over the property, the ownership, and now I own the property. And as long as I'm making those payments for the long haul to the bank, then that is legal if it's done correctly. So like in California, there's a lot of laws around buying properties that are in foreclosure. And as long as they're fully disclosed and you follow the laws, it's a very legal transaction. It's different state to state. I've done hundreds and hundreds of those. I'm not typically right now, I'm not focused on buying a lot of foreclosure types of properties. I'm actually going after and targeting properties that have lots of equity, mostly inherited types of free and clear, non-owner occupied properties. That's been a gold mine, and I think it's burned out landlords.
How are you identifying those, Gary?
With our software. Okay. So RealEstateInvestor.com has a full platform of the mailing lists and the types of lists that we can pull for people that our clients. And then we can market those if people want, or they can market themselves. I can cold call. I can do massive amounts of super targeted direct mail. Then I have a follow-up system that will automate the follow-up, text message, automatic email, automatic follow-up letters and postcards for the long haul, and push it over into a professional phone team that can actually call and screen an appointment set. So I can do the full gamut with RealEstateInvestor.com, fully turnkey solution for our clients. And so that's what I've built. We've got some top teams. I think we've got he was the #1 for Berkshire Hathaway in the country. His team has been using our stuff for a long time. I think he moved over to Keller Williams.
You're talking Jeff Cohn? Yeah. Jeff moved to KW last year. And,
so they've been with us a long time. And so anyway, that's, and I'll just for all the agents, the marketing that we do, we do not do marketing that basically is to list a house. All of our marketing is focused on going with a direct message to a seller to buy the house, which is awesome because there are a lot of sellers that don't want to deal with realtors. In fact, what did they say? 53% of all properties in 2019 were kind of investor type of properties, right? A lot of these properties, I mean, I can buy properties that already have a renter in it. So I can buy a property, I don't need the property vacant. Most agents are, how do you do that, right? I could buy a property and say, hey, I'll take your renter. In fact, I bought a property, 3 older ladies I still keep in contact with. They had a property with a son, had been living and squatting. One of the 3 ladies had inherited a property from the dad, and they had an estranged son that had been living in the house, will not leave for 3 years. In fact, no electricity in this house. It was a complete disaster in Oakland, California. Beautiful house. And I said, I'll buy the house and I'll buy it with your tenant. In fact, you don't even have to evict them.
When you're buying the problem, you are now the solution that they didn't know existed.
Right. Like you show me anybody that's offered you that, Mr. Seller. And then I gave them 2 choices. I said, I can buy it all cash right now. I lower my price because of that problem, or I will shepherd the entire transaction and I will get rid of the tenant. You'll pay the legal fees and I've got the attorney to do it. You don't have to do anything except pay the bill. And if there is a check that needs to be signed for that or some paperwork that needs to be signed, you take care of that. I'll shepherd everything else. And if I do that, as soon as they're out, then I'll close on the property and pay you a little higher price. And in that scenario, they said, hey, we'd like the higher price. And so I took care of everything and closed on that deal. And I think we made $32,000. By the way, I made $32,000 without putting a single nickel into that deal. I had the buyer, who was an agent buyer, by the way, that was ready to go. And the day after I had the eviction, and the seller or the squatter was out, I closed on that deal and got my 32 grand. How awesome is that?
Gary, I could listen to you for hours because I have so much to learn. I've been investing in real estate for 8 years, but my first investment was I bought a $90,000 foreclosed house with two buddies, and we've just built our portfolio from there. And what I love about this is you're showing us, here's how we basically positioned it, is to our sellers, you have the choice of listing traditionally or taking the snap offer. We even now have a $10,000 interest-free loan that we'll give them if they have some fix-ups to do in the middle, right? But over here, it's not just all buy your property. We can wholesale your property. We can structure it so that you stay living in it. And there's so many different options and opportunities that are here. And this is what we need to learn about. So I'm going to bring you back later on. And we're going to dive in more. Any final thoughts that we need to wrap with, Gary? Otherwise, people are just going to watch my bromance of you grow.
Let me, a couple things. One is the wholesaling piece is so easy. We do it virtually, by the way. We don't even have to go into the house. Very rarely do we actually even go inside the house. It's a very easy model. In fact, most of us use a one-page contract. It's an all cash offer, and most of our buyers love it because there's really no out clause and very, very simple. All I'm doing is I'm coming in and putting my name on the contract. Right? I'm not listing the property. We would disclose that we're a licensed agent, right? Here to buy the property, not to list it. That just is an extra disclosure. In some states, you have to have the specific words. I'll buy it in the name of my company. So I'm not a dealer. So I make sure that I have a company that is actually the company that's buying it, and then I'll just assign it. So my company, which is a S Corp for me, and I'll assign that contract to the new buyer, and I get paid at closing. It's as simple as that. And it's a wonderful thing to learn first. And then all the creative stuff that comes, and at some point, you and I will put together something for a group. The other piece that I'll say is a lot of people are panicked right now. I know that your agents that are being trained under you are realizing this is an incredible market. I know you just had your best month ever, right in the middle of COVID. The hardest market, especially for investors, is the tail end of a cycle. So you and I chatted about it. It's a 7-year cycle. It's been real estate for 100 years, 7 years. In fact, this is the first time it's gone as long as it's gone. And there are massive transfers of wealth in these changing cycles. And this is not a time to panic. Even Warren Buffett says when there's panic, that's when you buy, right? You want to buy low and you sell high. So I think this is a great time to do listings. This is a great time to do wholesaling and prepare for what's coming, because I think we're going to see opportunities that are going to be down the road a bit, 12 to 24 months, that are going to be incredible opportunities for all of us to be owning property, especially in an inflationary market. I predict we'll see prices drop for the next couple of years, foreclosures to be hot again, and then this massive appreciating market. And that's what we've seen historically with this type of stuff. Never seen unemployment at this rate, ever. And that's going to have this percussion phase, but being prepared and being able to be ready to buy at the right timing, when the fundamentals make sense, being able to raise money and being able to do creative deals. I think all of us in your group, and I know for our group, is amazing. I call it the 3 Ps. It's protect, it's to pivot with the market, and then profit. So with that, love your group and love presenting. I know I've been out with you guys in your market in Fargo.
You have. And, you're one of the brave ones. And,
yeah.
And Gary, I'll say this. Of all the deals that I've done since I started doing snap offers, it'll be 2 years this summer that will be since I've been doing this. I just ran my math, man, and between fees and everything else, I've grossed $1.5 million, and I've netted about $1 million doing it. And REI Vault has helped us to identify half of those properties. And so I can look at $500,000 of net money from working with you, and you're changing stars for a lot of people. We show how we do it at reivault.com/snap offer so people can see what we're doing. If you're not doing direct mail, I think it's the key to unlock a lot of this here. And Gary, you understand investing on such a high level, and I need to keep learning from you. So thanks for your time. God bless you, man.
Yeah. Hey, can I add one last thing?
Sure.
I think if anybody wants, so we renamed our business to RealEstateInvestor.com. You can go to REI Vault, but Real Estate Investor, I merged and we purchased a couple of software companies. So RealEstateInvestor.com. But I have a guide on marketing I think would be really helpful for your group. It is called the Definitive Guide. It's all the secrets that we've learned after doing 50 million pieces of direct mail. If you want, I can just I can give it to you after, and you can put it in your notes.
I'll upload that here with this. That'll be a huge gift. Thanks for that, Gary.
Okay, and there's a phone number that you can just text. It's not a marketing. We're not going to market to you, but it'll give you a bunch of tools and some of the stuff. I presented it at an event, and it's my free giveaway to all of you guys that can help, and we'd love to chat with you.
Well, thank you, Gary. My best to you and your ladies in your life. And with that, I'm going to go work on my TAM.
All right.
Thanks, buddy.
See
Be
you.
well.